What is going on, guys? I got another television review for you here today, a brand new one for a new show that just came out called Landman. It is a Taylor Sheridan created show. If you don't know who Taylor Sheridan is, he is the brilliant writer behind the movie Sicario, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I've talked about it on the show a million times. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But he's also created a lot of today's biggest shows, such as Yellowstone, 1883, 1923, a whole host of shows, all, Lioness, Special Ops Lioness, all these shows that are going on Paramount Plus right now. Tulsa King is another big one that he created with Sylvester Stallone that did really, really well. I think they just wrapped up season 2 and it did great numbers. It was consistently in the top 8 on Samba TV, and Taylor Sheridan is very much known for his layered writing on topics that tend to get very, very politicized right now. And that's exactly what this is. What you're watching in the show is Billy Bob Thornton as Tommy Norris, who is a crisis management oil executive. He works for John Hamm's character, Monty. And right off the bat, that hook is fantastic, if you ask me, given the politicized nature in current year of oil and topics like climate change. And then you get into this absolutely fantastic cold open where the show literally begins with the character of Tommy. He's flex cuff tied to a chair with a bag over his head, and he's being basically held hostage by the cartels, who he ends up having to negotiate with, because he wants talking about land rights, mineral rights, and they want to build a road through their town. And he basically comes to the conclusion with this cartel boss and says, look, we will not touch your product if you don't touch ours. And he goes into detail with him about just how much money is in the oil business. And you get this glimpse into this world that is absolutely unique to anyone. If you're a normal person, you don't know what it's like to be a roughneck in an oil field. So the hook for the show is fantastic right off the bat. And that's, if I was to critique this show, again, we're only through episodes 1 and 2. If I was to critique this show heavily, I would say that it strays too far, too often from the storylines involving Tommy's job, because what you end up getting into more is it populates around his family. So his wife, Angela, and his daughter, Ainsley, and his son, Cooper, they're also main characters in the show, and they all have separate storylines, and they all intersect with Tommy in different ways. So he deals with Angela because they can't really seem to control their daughter, Ainsley. And if I have a big critique of the show, it's the writing around the character of Ainsley, which is his 17-year-old daughter, who's basically portrayed as meat for men to look at. And there's some dialogue in here that I found to be unbelievably cringy. And I would say that if you were a regular person watching the show, you're not going to know the lingo around how an oil executive talks. You're not going to know the lingo about how a roughneck in the oil fields talks to their coworkers. So you can kind of act on faith that what you're getting there is a semi-accurate representation based on, this show was created with a man named Chris Wallace, who's a podcast talking about this stuff. So you can assume that, he's got a good handle on the way these things would go. And even if it's not, it's outside of your lived experience, so you wouldn't really know how to get into it or how to critique it. But the way that him and his daughter talk to each other, it's not how grown-ups and teenagers talk to each other. It's highly sexualized. It's weird. And it felt to me like a Hollywood note that, they needed to add this in there. I am not a prude, but it felt like placed degeneracy for the sake of placed degeneracy. And it slows down the rest of the story, because whenever Tommy is dealing with the issues of his job, when he's talking back and forth to Monty, when he's talking about the various concerns that come up with his job, because Monty has a great line, and I'm basically paraphrasing. He says, our job is endless crisis with momentary glimpses of extreme success. And that's really what you get the idea. It kind of reminded me of, in a way, what Ray Donovan was like with Liev Schreiber. His life is a never-ending cascade of things that need to be fixed, problems to solve given his work. And when it goes and strays into the story with his daughter or his wife or his ex-wife, it starts to feel bogged down. Both of them feel highly sexualized in a way that just didn't feel organic or natural, because it only seemed to come from the female characters. Now, the storyline around his son of Cooper, who his storyline starting out in episodes 1 and 2, is that he has dropped out of college. I think he was getting a degree in geology, and he's dropped out of college because he wants to understand every level of how an oil company works, because he hopes to one day start an oil company of his own. And it gets into a discussion that he has later on with his son about what it means, as losers and dreamers, which is there's two types of people that work in the fields, that work in the patch, as they call it. And his storyline is compelling because it ties in more naturally to the overarching plot, the thing that we're sold in this, which is the career of the landman, the career of somebody working in a field like oil and gas. So when it goes into his story, which has this great hook around a tragedy that happens in the middle of his first day at work, that stuff is great and it's fantastic and it catches really, really well. And Billy Bob Thornton is a fantastic actor who interacts excellently with everyone. So I have no complaints there. When he's on screen, he's doing fantastic work, but it's when it strays into these other storylines that I just don't think that it does as well as it could. It needs to spend more of its time with Monty solving problems. I also, I love the hilarious Michelob Ultra product placement and Dr. Pepper product placement that they're doing in the movie. Look, Taylor Sheridan, he's known for writing really, really well-layered stories and characters around politicized topics. It reminded me, in a way, he has an interaction with a lawyer that gets brought in from an outside firm in episode 2, and he has this interaction with this lawyer when they meet at a bar, where he basically says to the bartender, he says, and a club soda for the lady. And she very condescendingly says, basically she's mad that he called her lady, which is, of course, ridiculous and over the top, and is supposed to speak to the politically correct culture that we live in today. And he pushes back on her and says, your firm represents the Bin Laden family, for Christ's sakes. You're lucky I call you a lady at all. It reminded me of the scene with John Dutton and Summer in Yellowstone when he talks about the all the not cute and cuddly animals that get killed to make her quinoa. He's making a point by calling out some of the more absurd elements of the politicized nature of so many of these topics, in that, whether it's farming and this, whether it's land and oil. It's fantastic, and that's when the show is at its best, is when it's doing stuff like that, but it just tends to get away from there so much because the episodes are 55 minutes. Now, one of my biggest complaints about television in general is that I don't think any episode of any show needs to go longer than 42 to 44 minutes. I think that they could tighten up just about every script that's out there these days. And I think if you had done that, if you had tightened up the script, they would have found a different way to implement the story around his daughter and his, awkward interactions with her because of her sexualized nature, which just doesn't need to be there. It could be written in such a better way. She also has basically no connection to her brother, so you don't really grow any sense of care or empathy for these characters because they just don't, it's fine with his character. It's fine with the character of Tommy because you spend so much time with him, you can start to empathize no matter what. But when you're talking about these other characters, you don't get endless time to really let them grow on you. So to show them in such a one-dimensional nature, I think, is a flaw of the show. I do think that it has the possibility, it has the opportunity to grow and do better because there's more interaction with John Hamm's character of Monty, who is the oil executive. So what we need to see is more around how Monty and Tommy work together to solve these crises that they're constantly involved in. The lawyer, I don't know the actress's name off the top of my head, but the lawyer who's doing the scenes with him, she's fantastic and she's doing great work. Like I said, that line she has to deliver about not wanting to be called a lady, it's designed to make her look annoying so that he can have his moment to correct her and tell her what things are really like out here. And of course, he delivers that perfectly. She delivers that perfectly. It's classic Taylor Sheridan writing right there. I really can't sing the praises of the cold open enough. Like, it's one of the hardest things to do for a television show is to really pull you in quickly, especially if you in this day and age when people's attention spans are very short and people just don't have the time to sit and wait to see if they like a show. They really grab you early with that cold open. Look, there's a lot of great elements in the show early on. 55 minutes is, in my opinion, too long for a television episode, but it's not going an hour and 10. It's not going an hour and 20. If you want to go and check it out, especially if you like Taylor Sheridan's work in general, you're going to get a lot of what you like in this show. So if you like 1923, if you liked 1883, if you like Yellowstone, Tulsa King, all of those shows, I do recommend at least going and checking it out. Let me know what you think of it. Do you think my critique of the storyline with his family is too harsh? Because I really do think they need to spend less time focusing on the weird stuff with his daughter and more time focusing on the son's ambitions, because it's just more engaging, because it engages more people involved in the actually interesting part of Tommy's work. So let me know down below if you enjoyed episodes 1 and 2 of the show Landman. Let me know if you're planning to watch it. It'd be interesting to see, because Taylor Sheridan is one of my favorite writers working in Hollywood today. I'm looking forward to hearing everything you guys got to say in the comments. I'll hopefully have more episode reviews coming up soon. Later, guys.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.